All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of Brass Tack Bodybuilding. Today I'm here with Adam again and joined with Taeian Clark. Many of you might know Taeian, you might not, but those of you who don't, why don't you introduce yourself, man? Tell us a little bit about you.
Hey, I'm Taeian, as you said, Taeian Clark there. That's what you can find me on YouTube and Instagram and stuff like that. I'm probably the most famous for the Deca only cycles about 10 years ago when I did a video with Tony Huge. I was a moderator on the GH15 forums under the health section. And that's kind of where it became famous. I started giving out health advice, just started, fixing people's blood pressure issues or just many different random like health issues, whether related to steroids or not. And, I helped a lot of people. And then everybody started saying, oh, go ask Taeian Clark. And then they gave me my own section on there, actually. And so yeah, I'd say that those are the two most things I kind of became famous for, was the Deca only thing with Tony Huge and fixing people's health issues, basically steroid and non-steroid related.
Okay, and what is your background? Like, how did you get into bodybuilding and all this stuff to begin with? I know I initially found you through Phil, and Phil has a lot of respect for you. I know that you're super intelligent. Like, how'd you get into this where you're at now?
So I guess I'll start with the bodybuilding aspect. It's probably like 14 years old, like any young boy, you grew up on Arnold Schwarzenegger or like in my generation instance, Dragon Ball. I'm not sure, how old are you guys, by the way?
I'll be 25 soon.
25. Again, I'm approaching 40, so maybe is Dragon Ball your guys' era?
I mean, I didn't watch it, but it was our era.
Yeah. So growing up watching Dragon Ball and stuff like that, you're like, wow, you know what I mean? Who doesn't want to look like those guys? So yeah, that's what got me into bodybuilding. And then I, just started working out like any young kid does normally at like 14, you get like a pair of dumbbells, whatever. And yeah, so I started working out a little bit on and off till it was about 16, 17-ish. And then things just weren't going as planned, basically. And that is when I just started researching on my own. It was like, okay, why aren't I gaining as much as I should? What about this? What about this? And then I started running into some health issues, basically, mainly digestive wise, like nothing serious. And that's what kind of made me go down this endless spiral of researching, like even to this day. So I started researching probably around 16, 17, and I just turned 36. Yeah. And so almost 20 years of research now, still like, 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours, 10 hours a day. I just got addicted from then even to this day. And, I'd start researching from something so simple of like, okay, they have these groups of people or animals eating the exact same calories and macros, but they had a little more phosphorus in this group, everything else the same. And they gained a certain amount or way more muscle. And it's like, okay, nutrition is so much more in depth in calories and macros and this and that. And same with health issues. It's like, okay, my digestion was complete crap. And, most coaches or people in general will be like, just suck it up, eat more. That's the name of the game. And I was like, no, but I'm like going to the washroom, a bowel movement once every other day. If that, I'm like, this, shouldn't be normal. And, that's what led me down a spiral of researching anything and everything nutrition related to not just bodybuilding, but health wise. It's like, oh, look, if you're not eating adequate potassium, your intestines don't contract properly to move the waste through. You don't produce adequate stomach acid production if you're missing calcium, chloride, et cetera, et cetera. And I just, all that stuff was amazing to me at the time. And I just like, and even still to this day. So it's just like, reading about every single nutrient, hormone, and this and that involved in every single aspect of the body related to health and muscle growth and so on. So yeah, it's just been a 20-year spiral of nonstop fascinating research for me, basically.
Did you ever compete?
No, I was, when I was, like I said, there young, I was very, very serious, but stupid around that, 17, 18, 19ish, you know what I mean? I absolutely loved it, but I trained stupid. I ate stupid, did everything wrong. And after that period, I was like, I'd train up for a few months and I would stop for a while. I feel like the best way to describe it to people, I just burnt myself out doing everything so freaking stupid that I just kind of lost that passion for attempting to prep all day, stuff my face all day, etc. And was funny, and I always used to blame my genetics. I was like, oh, I have horrible genetics. That's what's wrong with me. And then I have a video on my YouTube of my best cycle ever. This is when I was in like my mid-late 20s. And after I, knew the research and how to do things properly, I ran the lowest dosage ever, and I half-assed a lot of things, and I grew amazing. And it was like, okay, so my genetics aren't shit. And, it just made me realize it did everything so intensely wrong, overtraining and undereating this and that, it just I burnt myself out basically to ever want to. Even now, I'll work out for a couple months and I stop for many, many months. I'm totally burnt out with that process of things, basically.
Yeah. I'm not there yet, but I feel you. I obviously wanted to bring you on today because we already talked about this, is to mainly talk about androgen receptor upregulation, downregulation, all that good stuff. We've seen a lot of talk about it, and somebody asked me this about a month ago, right? And I would have previously always said, just off of not even, am I on here still? What just happened? Can you guys see me?
Yeah, I can see it.
Oh my God. No, my phone, I guess, is linked to my computer and really just like shut off the whole screen. Okay, what was I saying? I would have previously always said that downregulation would occur just simply based off of like common sense, logical thinking, not knowing anything, right? Then somebody asked me about it, and I literally like did hours of research. I've probably done a lot since then because I've looked so deeply into it, just because of it spiked my curiosity and seeing people talk about it. After doing hours of research, when somebody asked me though, all I could come to the conclusion was that there was no research on downregulation occurring, and all we had was research and literature showing upregulation occurring. And I watched multiple podcasts, multiple videos from guys who are well-known educators. I don't want to say anybody's names that you would think to trust, right? These guys, they're smart. I'm not going to say they're stupid people. They're smart, but it's very convincing when you have all these people saying the same thing, citing these studies. You're looking at studies, okay, this makes sense. But then, I had a conversation with Phil and we looked at the studies, and they're all going back to initial use. And it's kind of seems like people are just saying that downregulation doesn't occur right off the bat because we have literature showing upregulation, which is obvious from initial use. But they're just assuming that downregulation doesn't occur in that initial progress that we see in that first 2 to 3 month period of starting a cycle, is not due to that the progress stalling is not due to downregulation, it's due to other mechanisms, which I'm sure plays somewhat of a factor. I don't know. But Adam, is there something you want to add on to this here?
Like fatigue from training is really like what the main driver of like the slowing in progress is, not from androgen downregulation, is mainly what like the conclusion is right now, or what people are saying. But it's like, could they downregulate from the same idea as insulin receptors? Those can get overwhelmed, or dopamine receptors. Does it work the same with androgen receptors with their sensitivity as well? And what if it's not even just the amount of androgen receptors and their downregulation in the quantity of them, but if it's the function of them? What if they just become desensitized to where there may be some sort of mutations in the way that they're produced? And because, we're producing androgen receptors all the time, what if that actually does play an effect, is the actual sensitivity of them? And that's the effect that we're seeing is, desensitization rather than downregulation. Or if it's just because, training fatigue builds up, adherence starts to, go all over the place. It's other factors besides just the androgen receptor that causes, once you get to, 10 weeks in, 12 weeks into a cycle, where you see that slowing in progress versus the first, 6 weeks or so.
You just threw a ton of information at him.
What were your thoughts just on all that?
Wait, did you say my name?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're asking you. I'm asking.
I didn't hear what you said there. Yeah, so like we talked, I think it was the day prior when you hit me up there. Semi go off track here with Vigorous Steve. He recently did a video on it.
I watched one of his videos.
The latest study he found, this is what I find study because funny, as we're talking, everybody posts initial use. Here's a study, whether it's hours after the injection, day after, whatever, initial use. Congratulations. Nobody's ever denied the fact that they upregulate. They upregulate, we all know that's what happens. Nobody ever, and this is what I was talking to you about. It's so funny that either people whether they haven't looked hard enough and they just haven't came across the studies, or if some of the experts have found the studies and they just kind of cherry picked them because, you know, it's going to make them look bad. They've always suggested 16-week cycles, and, you know, now they're, you know, saying, oh no, I was completely wrong in all of it, and I've made you guys stay on for way longer than you had to. Because yeah, it's funny, the study that Vigorous Steve found was at 4 weeks, the receptors were still upregulated. But the study that I have, it was 2 months into it where they were downregulated. And what's really interesting about this is that all the studies that I quote in my article, well, I quote that one, but all the ones that are real world observations, like, you know, where they have people go on a cycle for 12 weeks, like there's the Anavar study for 12 weeks, bam, 6 weeks, 90% of the strength and size just stops at week 6. Deca, they had a study on high dose Deca, 12 weeks again, bam, 6 weeks, everything goes to crap. So it's funny that Vigorous Steve finds a study, oh, 4 weeks they're still upregulated. I find the study come week 8, no more upregulation. So, you know, it's funny that all the observational, more real world data of actual muscle growth and strength and size, all of them that were done around 6 weeks, they stop right there. And, you know, their studies going up to 4 weeks, oh, still upregulated. And then right after that, the studies pass it. There's the 8-week study and the 6-month study. Both of them showed receptors return right down to baseline. And what was good about the studies I posted, because I think, even though I'm not refuting Vigorous Steve studies, I believe they are upregulated to week 6. I think that was in a rat study, but the 2 studies I posted were actual muscle biopsies where they tested the androgen receptors in the muscle cells. So yeah, I just think it's, you know, there's so much proof there when you have the real world data of studies showing, bam, no more gains in strength and size, like that combo. And, you know, we had the muscle biopsy study showing literally, hey, they went right back down to baseline. They did, however, show, because, you know, people be like, oh, I still make gains after a certain point, whatever, is that you still had an anti-catabolic effect from the anabolics. The anabolic effect wasn't there, but an anti-catabolic effect was still there, which is anabolic in and of itself, right? So that's also interesting.
Adam, try to fix your mic real quick. All right, Adam, every time you talk, you have to yell.
All right.
All right. After quick intermission, we're back. Nothing got resolved, but back to what you were saying, Taeian. What do you think it really is here? Because I've seen your articles. I've gone over those studies. You know what's funny, actually, is when I initially got asked that and I was doing the research, because like I said, I initially would have said downregulation just purely out of just thinking about it, because that's what makes sense. That's what happens with a lot of shit in the body. You have a negative feedback loop. Eventually, you know, downregulation will occur. But after doing that research, you know, I felt confident in saying that, oh, we only have research saying upregulation occurs, because that's all I was able to find. And that's all the people I saw talking about. That's all they really cited. And I really, the studies you've posted that you cited, it's very hard to find those. And what's funny is when I was initially doing that research, I didn't see any of those studies. And then after I saw them on your website and I researched it, those studies come up now, which is obviously just has to do with probably like the fucking algorithm or something, how SEO works. I don't know, but it's crazy because now they're there. And before I literally couldn't find them at all. But these studies are out there. Do you think these guys saying that downregulation doesn't occur is just ignoring them, or they're just not aware of them? Because they're just flat out saying like downregulation doesn't occur, so this is why progress stalls, rather than exploring those as options, but also saying downregulation might occur. We don't know. It's just like downregulation doesn't occur and no explanation as to why that wouldn't happen. It has to be these other things. Do you think it's like there's some motive behind that because they have this bias already, or they just don't know about that research that we have clearly showing the downregulation?
Obviously, I have no clue. I'm not in anyone else's body, but my guess is maybe like a 50-50. Like you said, you couldn't find them. I bet there is. From my observation of a lot of people, I find there's a lot of people there that research like just very surface layer stuff. Like they'll research a couple studies, make an article on it, and they don't go any more in depth. And you can tell they don't know any more in depth about stuff. And I do feel that is a lot of people. So I feel it's a lot of people, like, you know, let's say they're researching androgen receptor downregulation. They maybe give it like an hour, I don't know, they're go through very minimal effort. I think there is a lot of people that are like that. But in my mind, I feel like there's no doubt that like I came across them. I feel like there has to be people that have came across them, have studied, have looked as hard as I have. And then they're like, you know, a lot of these guys are coaches, right? And imagine, like, you're 10 years deep telling everybody 16-week cycles, they don't downregulate, and then you have this huge or decent or whatever moderate following, and you're like, yeah, guys, I kind of just screwed you all over, and I'm a big fuck up. I told you all to go 16 weeks and wasted a bunch of your time and money and health when you could have just did 6 weeks. So I feel there has to be a good amount of people there where it's like, no, I have to. Well, because here's the other thing. I've argued with a moderate amount of those people that are other coaches and experts, and I'm like, here's this study. Here's, like, I posted the studies, and it'll just get ignored. So it's like, I know some of them have seen them because they'd be arguing with me, whether it's on YouTube comments or something like that. And it's like, you're reading my comments and you're arguing back and forth with me, and all of a sudden you disappear now. So like, I do think that happens both ways.
So you think that, and you can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So you're saying that a 6-week cycle and then coming off for a shorter period of time, let's say 2 weeks, 4 weeks is what I'm assuming, for like a cruise or bridge. Would that be correct? That you be on for like 6 weeks, off for like 2 to 4 weeks?
Yeah, depending on how long the drug is in your body, right? So if you're on test prop with a short ester, you are going to be off just for a couple weeks. But if you're on something like Androgen decanate, and depending on the dose, right? Because if you're on 2 grams, it's going to take a while to get to baseline. You might want that 5 to 6 weeks plus off. So, yeah. And what's funny, I referenced in one of my articles is because I always love to use actual successful people with the science too. I reference all these bodybuilders, and most all of them say the same thing. Jay Cutler has talked about going on 8 weeks. There's Ian Harrison, Sean Ray, Kevin Levrone, Dorian Yates, and you can even see his bulking cycles, and they all say the same thing. About week 6 to 8, they'll say, I felt I got no more benefit, so I just came off. And then some people will argue that, oh, they just don't want to admit they're on longer. It's like, no. Every single one of those guys emits like 4-month-long cycles pre-contest time. Why would they lie about their bulking cycles being shorter and feeling no more growth benefits, but admit to 4-month-long cycles come pre-contest? So they're, you know what I mean? So that throws that out the window.
Okay, so the reason why I have always believed in longer cycles, 16 weeks, 20 weeks at a time, even though I do agree that at a certain point, you do reach that plateau. In my opinion, it comes around like 10 to 12 weeks, just in my own experience. But couldn't you also say that just being on that large amount of anabolics is still having that benefit towards your training, and the training is what builds the muscle? And so if you're able to continue training at a certain level of output with certain loads and still having that recovery ability, isn't that going to build more muscle over time from that training for a more consecutive period of time?
That is where I do absolutely agree. I forget, I think it was on Steve's podcast where I mentioned this, where I don't deny the benefit of that. As we discussed before our little break there, the study still showed that there was anti-catabolic benefit still being had, which is anabolic in and of itself. So if you would obviously go natural, no longer have the enhanced nitrogen retention, this and that, you're no longer in this like supreme anabolic, whatever, you're, just anti-catabolic. Yeah, no, I do not. Okay, here's what I said on Steve's podcast. I see the benefit in the long cycles now. After a long while, it's not my main go-to, but I see the benefit into it because of like what you said, you're staying on, you're still training, this and that. For the sheer amount of people that completely go haywire, off the walls, stop training or barely train, undereat, start eating the complete garbage, the second anabolics are out. There's a large amount of people when you do those short cycles who aren't really, really hardcore bodybuilders, they just let their life go to complete crap. And they would probably be better staying on a long cycle because that keeps them mentally into the training and the eating and getting that. As I said, the Anavar study, as they quoted it, 90% of the strength and size was the first 6 weeks, but they still got a 10% benefit in comparison going the extra 6 weeks that they wouldn't have got naturally. So there is that benefit there, absolutely. And I think it might benefit some people better to stay on if they're going to go off the walls, which I think is majority of the people, to be honest.
Okay, then another question is, would you say that there is no place for very long esters like Deca or EQ, because those are going to take 8 or 10 weeks to even reach their peak concentration? And so once you get to that peak concentration, then you're just going to come right off rather than staying at that peak concentration for a period of time and progressing at that level in your circulation and benefiting from it.
That answer is a yes and no. So one, as I mentioned, there's actually a study on Testy and a study on Deca. There might be multiple. I can't remember right now. Yeah, where they did 12 weeks for the Deca, and again, all the strength and size was by week 6. So, okay, so if all the strength and size was by week 6, we show no matter what, as soon as you initiate AAs and with the receptors down regulating, you hit that wall and it stops working. The other thing about hitting peak concentrations, I think a lot of people always confuse this with is that, and I'm sure you've seen it too, most people assume till the drug hits peak concentration, you get no effect. You'd be like, oh, it doesn't kick into week 4. It's like, no, it kicks in day 1. It's just that it does hit the peak, whatever there. So there was actually a really neat study with Testy. This one was posted all over the internet. They didn't front load or anything, but they actually showed it kind of pointing towards a receptor down regulation as well, that by week 3 had way more benefits in strength and size and strength, so it's showing it wasn't all just mineral retention and stuff and water weight. And then it started to level off at week 3, showing that it was starting kind of trending towards the down regulation. But it did show even on the long Easter, not majority, but it had the highest upward trend by week 3. And in my experience, because that's what I always did. A lot of my guys do Deca only cycles. As I mentioned, that was one of the things I got famous with. And a lot of my guys do that because they want to keep their hair and stuff like that. And as you know, Deca is super long acting. All my guys would see gains rapidly right away, just like the study showed, just like the 6-week Deca cycle. 12 weeks, but the gains stop at 6 weeks. All my guys see all their gains by within that first week. They're going up, strength's going up, weight's going up, they're feeling it, whatever. And even if you check charts, actually, this is funny enough, Deca has the high spike within 24 hours. Not peak, not whatever, but it has a very large surge within 24 hours, then it levels off. So every shot, you're getting this massive 24-hour shot. But, so yeah. Sorry. Yeah, so I used to suggest the long Easters more. Now I'm going more fully towards shorter acting drugs because you have that shorter time off. Whenever somebody would go on the longer acting forms of any drug, we would have about 4, 5, or 6 weeks off. EQ's always been out the window because its half-life is like 21 days, I think, or something like that. It's completely ridiculous. So yeah, EQ's always been out the window. But here's the other funny thing, semi-off topic and probably going to blow your guys' mind. I did recently mention this in a video. There's some really neat, crazy studies that showed milligram per milligram, the longer forms like, Deca versus NPP, Testy versus Test Prop, etc., had 3 times more nitric anabolism / nitrogen retention than the shorter Easters. And even when the doses were equated. But, that necessarily doesn't mean more growth, having higher nitrogen retention, etc. They could just be like, oh, more nitrogen retention not going to equal to more growth. This was in animals, however. They killed the animals after, and they actually had 3 times larger muscle mass. Same dose. So let's say that animals were on a human equivalent dose of 300 milligrams Deca a week of NPP or Androgen decanate. The Androgen decanate had 3 times more muscle mass, basically, in the tested muscles than the NPP. So we know nitrogen retention is higher, anabolism is higher, and muscle mass was actually higher. And this kind of
with the longer ester.
And this kind of always goes with what many pros in the 90s, 2000, et cetera, always said. I feel like I bulk better on the longer acting form of the drugs, and I cut better on the shorter forms, which also leads into that. The study showed equal dosages, no matter what, of, again, NPP versus Deca or Test Prop versus Test E, is that the shorter acting forms were 2 to 3 times as androgenic. Equal dose, nothing else varied. There were no matter what, even when they mimicked the dosing pattern, like they shot suspension or NPP, they did a whole bunch of different drugs. They did it like every 4 hours to like mimic a long acting form, and it was still 2 to 3 times as androgenic on the prostate, etc. So we know that the shorter drugs actually do cut you up better, more androgenic, whatever. Yeah, so to answer that question with this is something I've been going back and forth with, and I've been testing on clients who want to test it, is what's going to be more gains? Having something that is proven more anabolic and more muscle growth, the longer form of the drugs, but in having 4, 5, 6 weeks off, or only having 2 or less or more, give or take, weeks off with something that is less anabolic. That is something I've been kind of testing on clients who wanted to go through that experiment to figure out like what is going to be more beneficial. And I think the shorter breaks is going to be more beneficial.
This just led me into a whole rabbit hole because you just touched on quite a few different things. Fucking, so I'm sure you've heard this go around a lot too. I do want to come back to androgen receptor, but since you just brought this up, that all anabolics are the same, right? Doesn't matter. It's just you might have a better response to one than the other. You might get more side effects, but on paper, on literature, they all produce the same effect regarding like the muscle growth that you're going to see from any anabolics. And from the first time I heard that, I thought that was bullshit. You know, there has to be some gaps in that. And there's no way through all the practical applications that I've had, and I've seen it others, there's no way that all anabolics are the same milligram for milligram. It's not, it can't be true. You're saying that right now. And I think people are getting this literature. You know where that comes from, why people say that and what the holes in that are. Okay. I was just,
well, what throws it right out of the window is that nobody can, and I think somebody, because I was semi-arguing with, again, some other coach or something like that about this. And then I think he tried to say to me, no, I'm talking about if we match the dosages, as in like we know that M trend is stronger, so we're going to match the dosage. And it's like, no, that throws it out the window. Then you can't be saying because 1 milligram M trend is, that's like taking a gram a test or whatever. Who knows? You know what I mean? Is that you can't say they're the same strength and same muscle growth, because if I go and take 1 milligram a test, I'm not going to get any muscle growth, but I'm going to get muscle growth off 10 milligrams Superdrol, 1 milligram M trend, and so on. Like, no, like here's a better way to put it, which is absolutely, I would say, concrete evidence. When you get to the ceiling of every anabolic, you know what I mean? Whether it's a gram of test, a gram of Winstrol, whatever, you're not going to gain any more. You know what I mean? Like when you're fully maxed out, but like when you're comparing like 500 milligrams versus this and that, like I feel it's completely like it's undeniably different result,
Yeah, 100%. I know you wanted to add something.
Well, I think the biggest flaw in the argument that every steroid is going to promote anabolism the same milligram per milligram is really just the fact that they have different molecular weights based on the ester. So, and this also kind of goes back to what you were talking about, which like kind of contradicts what you were saying, where you were saying you're going to get more anabolism from longer esters, but in 500 milligrams of Deca, you're going to have less of the actual nandrolone, you're going to have more of the actual decanoate, versus with MPP, it's a shorter ester, so it has a lower molecular weight, and so in that 500 total milligrams, you're going to have a higher ratio of nandrolone, so you'd be getting more nandrolone, and the nandrolone is what's causing the anabolism, not the ester. So that kind of contradicts what you were saying, which is kind of interesting, but it also contradicts the fact that they're the same milligram per milligram.
Yeah, it throws it out that window that whether you're getting 50 more or 100 milligrams or whatever a week of NPP because you're using that over a decade, just throws it out the window. And so who knows the mechanism? Even they didn't know in the studies. All the studies I read, they're like, we don't know, but this is what we just keep seeing. They tested so many different esters that I've never even heard of. Like there's like 20 plus different ones, and like every time the longer it got, the more anabolic it was. And same thing, like I said, it was more test prop 2 to 3 times more androgenic than all the longer forms of tests. It was, we don't know why, but it is what it is.
Why do you think? What would you conclude based off of just what you can theorize?
I don't think that ester is having an effect in itself. Like I think somehow it is altering, whether it's doing something to alter the hormone, putting them together, because as I said, it can't be a release thing because they try to mimic the longer acting form. So they're shooting all the different short ones every few hours. Like they're literally mimicking it, like the same dosage. So they do like 2 milligrams every hour versus whatever that equals to for the day. They literally equal it out like in so many different patterns. Still more androgenic, the short ester, and still more anabolic, the long one. So it's not a release thing at all. So it's, who knows, literally is the answer.
That's that could make sense, is like the release, because it, I guess, could be analogous to, when you're eating carbs and how fast that absorbs. If it's a little bit digested slower and absorbed slower, like if you have it with fiber, you can potentially partition more of that glucose as muscle glycogen. You can use it more into the muscle versus if you just slam your system, like with a short ester or with just a bunch of simple carbs, you're not going to be able to absorb it as well. You're not going to be able to partition it as well. So that's what could make sense is if you have a short ester, you know, less of it may be being used for anabolism versus a slower trickle of the actual drug can be used for muscle protein synthesis, where the rest of it's going to get metabolized somewhere else, going to go somewhere else in the body, converted into, you know, DHT or DHN or something, you know, DHT. That could make sense. And who knows how well they were. I mean, assuming, you know, what you're saying is correct, that like they actually did, you know, align it perfectly with the release, but who knows if they actually did? I don't know. That's the only thing that could really make sense.
So you think the slower release allows better absorption?
That's basically what I'm saying. But
and you know, there's multiple studies on it's multiple on there. I think I found 3 or 4, and yeah, it's all the same conclusion. It's like, yeah, but you know, I'm not hardcore into the, you know, like chemical side of things. You know what I mean? Like I don't even know how they attach that the ester, you know what I mean? Who I do not, but here's the thing, you look at like D-ball and EQ, but I know they are, what is it, you know, when they add the 17A alkaline, whatever, the methyl group. I'm not sure, I have no idea about chemistry in that sense. I have no idea when they attach that ester. Is it all, you know what I mean? I do not know how that works chemically. You know, you have your whatever, your molecule structures. If they're attached, I don't even, you know what I mean? Is it attaching? Is it this or that? I have zero knowledge basically on chemistry. So it's like, is it the same when you add the methyl group? And as we know, like what is EQ? D-ball is EQ, right? It's methylated EQ. Completely different drugs, all because they changed that one little thing. Is that kind of the same what's going on here with the anabolism? That is my only guess for what's going on.
I think the main difference with methylation is just that it makes it orally bioavailable, so that when you do take it orally, it can get into the system a lot quicker, and that's really where you're seeing the benefit of the more androgenic effects and the quicker absorption is just because you're taking it orally, versus if you injected D-ball, I mean, you can inject D-ball, but it's not going to have the same effect as EQ.
Because it's suspended in oil, no? If it was suspended in water, it'd be more immediate.
Well, yeah, and EQ also has a longer half-life.
Yeah, EQ completely, like literally chemically wise, right? You have EQ. All they do is attach the methyl donor. You now get D-ball, completely different, right? D-ball makes an estrogen that EQ doesn't make. It converts to a different DHT, I think, and I can't remember which EQ converts to DHB, right? They have completely different aftermath effects, all because they changed that one little chemical thing in it. And you know, if you make D-ball injectable and make it into an oral, doesn't get rid of that methyl group. And you know what I mean? EQ is EQ, completely different effects. D-ball is D-ball, completely different effects, whether you inject it or take it orally, right? So it's like, we know when you alter that chemical structure even slightly, just completely different drug. So yeah.
Tell me about this Deca only cycle.
Yeah, I was gonna ask about this too.
Yeah, well, I'm sure you guys have heard about it. Probably a decent amount of people being like, "What do you think about Deca only?"
Oh yeah, I mean, I've been asked that question many times, I'm sure, but
so here,
I saw you talk about it.
Let me see my questions so that you can better answer it. So the flaw that I see with the Deca only cycle is that you're not going to have as much conversion into DHT because you're going to have conversion into DHN. So you may have libido issues. And because also DHT has other effects, you know, on strength as well. So if you're not going to have a substrate for, you're having 5-alpha reductase activity converting into DHN, but you're not going to have really any DHT because you're also suppressing endogenous testosterone production, right? So you're going to have, it still does aromatize a little bit, but not as much as testosterone. So that's the argument for you're going to have more dry gains. You're not going to have as much estrogen, but isn't that also less, you know, or more cardiotoxic as well? Because you're going to have potentially low estradiol levels, maybe not too low. So you're not going to have as much DHT in estradiol is the flaw that I see with it.
So 2 to 3 different kind of big answers there for this questions. One, many people confuse. I don't know where this got confused, but everybody who comes to me, they'll be like, Deca only isn't better. It's not better. And like arguing with me on it. I never said it was better. This is where people get really confused. And I've said it so many times, very clear, the context. The main reason I suggest Deca only, the biggest reason is hair loss. People who come to me, a lot of people come to me get hair loss. Don't want to use tests. They don't want to use finasteride because of the side effects, etc. I've always said, you can date back my post for like 10 years. Deca is, let's say, just comparison to test. I always say this, much weaker fat loss, insanely weaker strength, say maybe a little more anabolic, hard to judge there. It's complete shit in a lot of different ways, but it is absolutely amazing. This is what I call it, the side-free anabolic, basically. Doesn't mean you don't get no sides. It's the typical, you won't get gyno, you won't get hair loss, etc. when you're using it solo. So the main reason a lot of guys come to me, Deca Solo became popular, is for guys who didn't want to get the typical cosmetic side effects. So yeah, that is why most people use it, and that's why I suggest it. And it's based off a lot of all the old pros. This is where I came about it. I realized all those old pros, Mike Mentzer, Deca D-Ball, Victor Richards, even up to the 90s, guys were still doing it. Victor Richards, Deca Anavar, Lee Priest used Deca D-Ball for a lot of his career, then later on a little bit of test. All of the old pros, they're basically always say, I never used test, never knew anybody who used test. And I was like, okay, none of these guys have gyno, none of these guys have hair loss, acne, etc. And I was like, okay, let's look into using this. And then I started looking at the research and seeing that, okay, it was utilized for HRT many times, namely HIV and stuff like that. And they flat out compared it to test. They were like, okay, the Deca users report better quality of life, better mood, better this, better that. And I was like, let's give this a go. And so, that's what I utilize, and most of my guys utilize, wanting to avoid side effects. And now with the libido loss, this is the big thing. I had this in my article where I explain it in depth too. So when I first started, I used Deca and test, and I, had sexual dysfunction. And then when I used Deca, my libido and sexual function was through the roof. 95.
Did you use Caber in either of those scenarios? Were you using Caber going?
No, I just stopped. I would stop the cycle, basically. It was very early on. And when all my guys would also use it, they're 95%, I would say, get way better actual libido and function than test solo on Deca solo. And then I found out Deca increases aromatization. So when you have something like test, which shoots up, 100 milligrams T puts most people, especially in studies, at the upper range of estrogen and prolactin. Deca increases aromatization of testosterone. Use those two together. So now you're getting even more estrogen and even more prolactin. That is where the Deca dick thing is, because I noticed all the old pros I talked to, they're like, I never heard of this Deca dick thing. I never had this issue. It was only a 2000s thing online when everybody started using test plus Deca. So yeah, all my guys use it solo, and they report, much better function. And same with me. Sorry. The other thing here, so with the whole DHT function, it only makes DHN, which is extremely weaker. Yes, this is what I pointed to people why Deca is so great for cycling, more so than HRT, for cycling for people wanting to avoid sides. Because somebody might not want to run 500 milligrams of test or a gram of test and have 5 to 10 times the DHT, basically. It's going to rape their hair if they get hair loss, etc. With cycling, with these more anabolic agents, less androgenic, you're able to go to the 500 milligrams, 1,000 milligrams, and not get the jacked up androgenic activity. The thing with it here too is, so there's a disease called Klippfinger syndrome. I think I'm pronouncing it right, where they lack the ability to convert test into DHT. That they're lacking the 5-AR enzyme. So what they wanted to see in these studies, they were like, okay, because there's just androgen receptors. There's no DHT receptor and test receptor. They're like, let's see if different androgens will replace the functions. We know that at different sites, they bind at different strengths. They're like, let's just test if we need, because testosterone binds to the prostate 10 times weaker than DHT or something like that. They're like, let's just use 10 times more testosterone, see if it gives the same effect as DHT. So that's what they did. They put these men, instead of 100 milligrams test, on a gram of testosterone. And then they started getting all the DHT effects, like the penis growth, the prostate growth, etc. And so like, okay, yeah, so here's the proof that we just have an AR receptor, but the different drugs, DHN, nandrolone, and testosterone, they'll bind to all the receptors just at very different strengths. So again, that's why Deca is so good, guys wanting to avoid tides. It's like, I don't want my hair to go, so I want to use a gram of Deca, and I'm only going to get like 100 milligrams of tests worth of androgenic activity in my scalp. So that is the main reason why most guys will use Deca solo.
Okay, and then would you say in the clients that you've worked with that have done a Deca only cycle, when you look at their lab work, what does their HDL look like compared to guys who take tests with Deca? And then another question would also be, what are your thoughts on the other side effects of Deca, such as more beta amyloid production, over time, obviously, which can cause Alzheimer's, and then also just more of the HPTA suppression because it's more progestogenic for people who maybe want to come off and be natural one day. It may be harder to do that with PCT versus if they were just taking testosterone. So what are your thoughts on both those things?
So okay, which one? Okay, I'll go with the HPTA suppression first. So it has longer suppression. There's one study that was like I forget, like a review study where they'd be like, oh yeah, the nandrogens were more suppressive, whatever. A study that actually compared different dosages of test versus Deca, they were literally the same suppression across all parameters, and nandrolone was actually a little less suppressive. And I always just point this out to prove, hey, look, it's the same or less, but the less was like minuscule amount, but you can still say it was less. So example, the LH might have been 0.4 on Deca, and the LH was 0.3 on testosterone. So like it was basically the same suppression. It is just, it does have that longer, suppression time because everybody uses Deca, which is, it's 2 more extra days longer than Testy as an example, whatever. So that is my reply to that. And, that is something that, hey, if you're going to be suppressed for a lot longer, that is something that you have to accept, right? Like anything and everything, you're going to accept this side versus that side for this benefit or that benefit. I did a video on this where somebody talked about, because they were talking about also the cytotoxicity of nandrolone versus testosterone and all these different things. And so this is true. It absolutely is true, but we know the reason why. And this is why I said like it's side-free anabolic, meaning cosmetic sides. But it doesn't matter / can be controlled. And what I mean by that, so the cytotoxicity levels, the amounts they use to show that Deca was like, I forget the percentage more toxic, but it was so minuscule amount, it's amount that wouldn't matter in a real world setting. And then as they raise the dosages, you can see in the graph, Deca did end up still being more toxic, but it was like 5% versus the like 50% or whatever in this like minuscule amount. And people always refer that to, it's because the estrogen production test, you have more estrogen, Deca, you don't have enough estrogen. It's like, no. Estrogen is actually neurotoxic and cytotoxic too in higher dosages. People keep saying, yeah, it's like, so if anybody's using 200 milligrams test even and not keeping estrogen in the TRT levels, you're also causing neuron death, cell death, whatever, etc. So the other way, the controllable way talking about this, all those other effects are due to the CA2 levels via nandrolone. But this isn't necessarily special to nandrolone. The stronger the steroid and the more anabolic effect, one of those effects is the mineral retention and nitrogen retention. So the stronger steroid is, the more mineral retention, more nitrogen retention, etc., whatever. This is why you see this with Deca. It causes more calcium uptake and higher extracellular cellular calcium levels as well. The calcium is what causes cell death. This is what causes brain cell death, neuron cell death, heart tissue death, all of that. This can be controlled. This is where I suggest adequate doses of magnesium and K2, which keeps calcium ionized, keeps it where it needs to be, shuttles it, whatever into the bones. But yeah, when dosages are equated, basically, the best way to say this, testosterone is kind of protective at TRT levels. Anything above that has the same dangers as nandrolone and anything else like that that is above TRT levels.
Okay.
Similar toxicity.
Have you noticed in your client's blood work, their HDL would be lower with Deca only versus Deca with TRT?
No, Not at all. Very, very tricky to answer. And the best way is just to look at studies, because I'm very, very extremely health orientated. So like when my guys come to me, they are on extreme amounts of vegetables. Like you're eating like 300 grams of vegetables a meal, this and that. So it's like no matter what, whoever comes to me, you're eating an extremely different than they have before. So the best way is kind of to look at studies, and if you look at the studies of actual testosterone versus androgen, they're like very minusculely different. So that's, best to look at the studies where they have controlled setting, where they just have like, random person eating their same diet, you know what I mean, before they go on HRT/TRT.
Yeah, and it's also kind of hard to, actually pinpoint it, just because every person has a different genetic predisposition, different lifestyle, different level of activity, body fat, all that. So
the guys with completely trash lipid levels, and then the guys be like, yeah, man, they'll come off the cycle and they'll go eat nothing but cheeseburgers and fries and beer and this and that, you know what I mean? And that's as we were talking about the benefits of the long cycle. So yeah, there's the guys who do that, and it's like no matter what, their blood work looks like shit.
Okay, going back to the downregulation, upregulation, downregulation. Yeah, we're going all over the place. There's so many different points that are coming up that we could just go to the rabbit hole. But with the downregulation, upregulation of androgen receptors, from what I'm gathering here, and tell me if this is correct or not, is when you're starting, you're at a natural state or just a TRT state. You have a certain level of androgen receptors, and then when you start a cycle, it's usually a big jump, right? You're usually not starting like a 100, 200 milligram. You're going like straight to fucking 500 milligram test, whatever, some Deca. So you're having that huge jump, right? So that's why you probably get a big response, right? Because of that massive jump, that difference. And now over the next 6 to 8 weeks, say that upregulation starts to stop, it starts to downregulate, taper down over time. Progress isn't going to be as strong. It's not necessarily going to stop. Just there's so many factors that go into that. Now, at that point, what would be, there's 2 ways to go about it, 3 ways, I guess. You could continue the cycle for 16 weeks, the same dose, and just get, mediocre results. You could increase the dosage, which is going to cause more upregulation, but it's not going to be to the same extent as the first jump, because there's only so much upregulation that could occur, I'm assuming, and you're usually not doubling your dose every time as well. Not that it would be this linear upregulation regardless. It's going to be less and less, going from 750 tests to 1,000 to 2 grams or whatever. Like, you're going to get less upregulation each time. So you could do that over the course of 16, 20 weeks, which is what I do. That's what most people I know do, and it works. But obviously, it's not the same as that first 6 to 8 week period. So you could do that. You could stay on the same dose, or you could stop the cycle at 8 weeks, allow downregulation to occur, come back to baseline for 4 or 5 weeks, whatever, depending what you're running, and then start again for another 8 weeks to get that same initial response. Is this correct?
So I've tried this, because I've had this thought too, and everybody would always ask me this too. What if I just keep upping the dosage? So I hate saying these things, because then I always get comments like, oh my God, you're testing this on clients and this and that. It's like, no, I'm not testing anything on clients. I have somebody comes to me and says they want to do this. I'm like, go ahead. You know what I mean? Like, you're asking for my opinion of it, whatever. So I've had people, like I had a client not too long ago where he's getting Deca scans every week, right? So, he really wanted to see how much he was gaining. He was very analytical about that. And he wanted to stay on it. And I'm like, I've tested this a few times. The gains, it's like, you still just get the anti-catabolic effect. And he's like, okay, what if I double my dose? I'm like, I've also done this before and I don't see any benefit. So this guy literally doubled his dose. I think we were at 800 or a gram, I can't remember. And he literally doubled it, wanted to stay on. And it was the exact same gains as I seen, like people would get like with the anti-catabolic effect, like a pound, little bit here and there. Like, he basically gained nothing, and definitely no more than he would have been. Of course, upped his calories. Yeah, when I first came across it, it was a close friend of mine, like, a person I knew in person. And he's like, I'm seeing such good gains, I want to stay on. And he ended up doubling it, and he just kept increasing his calories, and it's like he's just burning through them. He just saw no extra gain. So yeah, I've trialed it a lot of times, and I just see the gains you would have got if you had to stay at the same dose every single time. And I've done it for like years now with people.
Okay, so say we took a 20-week time frame, and over that 20-week time frame, every 4 weeks, we're titrating the dose up. Let's say we're even just doubling it every 4 weeks, just for the sake of the conversation here, versus doing an 8-week blast, then coming off or going down to a TRT for 4 weeks and then doing another 8-week blast. Do you think comparing both of those two 20-week phases, the person who took the shorter cycles is going to have better results, or do you think it's going to be, negligible?
Assuming, as I was saying, the benefits of a long cycle, if somebody's not coming off and stop training and not eating and stuff like that, without a doubt in my mind, the results and experience I've had when somebody does the short, all my guys do short cycles, the second they do it, like I get emails, I just got one like a week ago, all the time, of followers being like, man, I really tracked my progress this time. My gains stopped at week 6 and I went on and I was in denial about it. And he's like, everybody who does it never goes back, basically. And so that is kind of your answer. It's undeniable once they do it and try it.
What is going on, guys? Hopefully you are enjoying today's episode of the podcast, and hopefully you're learning a thing or two. That's why I do these, is to help you guys learn. And if you're not learning, then what is the point? But if you are, I want you to do 4 things. First thing is going to be take notes. Second thing is going to be like this video. Third thing is going to be subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And fourth thing is going to be always use code SEB when you order anything from HG Muscle, because you're going to get 10% off. And why spend more when you could spend less with code SEB? I'm just kidding. That should be a slogan, because it honestly sounds great. But First one, not a bad idea. Taking notes, never gonna hurt. Might learn more. Second 2, also not a bad idea. Would appreciate the like and the subscribe, but you don't have to do anything you don't want to do. Now, let's get back to the podcast. Now, one thing I would also just think based off of this is that response you're getting in that first 6 to 8 weeks, because it's an initial, there's obviously a psychological aspect to it. You're getting stronger. Is that actual myofibril tissue being built in that time frame, or is it other factors and that's not actual muscle tissue that you're putting on in that 6 to 8 week time frame? Because that is a very short time frame. And are you saying that we can build a shit ton of muscle in 6 to 8 weeks and maintain that compared to a 20-week cycle? You're going to get the majority of that in the first 6 to 8 weeks, not just strength, not just your experience of the using gear, but the literal muscle tissue that you get.
One thing to exclude, so yes, basically the answer. And the one thing to exclude is that, because most of my guys don't use tests. If you have used tests and not used tests, you'll instantly see the difference. When you go on a test cycle, you're up 10 pounds the first week. There's so much goddamn water weight. And a lot of people, a lot of people stay the same size forever because they'll use test cycles. They'll go up that 10, 15 pounds and they'll be like, I can't come off because I lose all my size. Those guys will be they'll just yo-yo. They think they're eating enough to grow, but they're just eating enough to grow a little bit and gain nonstop water. And they think they're losing gains after their cycles. When a guy runs a Deca only cycle, you lose a pound or 2 max. So that is where you really see hey, I actually gained tissue because I came off, my Deca or NPP. And I basically kept all my size. And the other thing to add to it, you might not remember because we just had a quick conversation yesterday, came across some really, really cool studies where they're using the different androgens for height growth. These kids gain, so muscle is easy to grow in comparison to bone. That's just mineral dense material, almost half calcium, phosphorus, etc. It's dense material. Kids gained an inch in 6 weeks on anabolics in height. So to be oh yeah, there's no way I can gain adequate tissue in this short time frame. There's kids growing an inch in 6 weeks using anabolics. And what's really neat about these studies is, again, I was saying this to you yesterday, is when they were first doing them, they're having them stay on 12 weeks, 20 weeks, etc. 6 weeks, stop growing. They just stopped growing no matter how long they stayed on them. And then they did repeating studies because they noticed, hey, there seems to be a short window that they can get height growth. And then the other studies, that's what they did. They would do 6 weeks, but they did a much longer time off. I'm not sure it's because, they're kids. They don't want to blast them with anabolics nonstop. But they noticed when they did the 6 weeks on, whatever amount of weeks off, added 6 weeks again, they gained another inch. And because obviously they're not trying to make giants, they'd only do it a couple times. So the kids grew 3 inches and they would leave them alone. You know what I mean? But it's they're gaining freaking bone tissue, man, at an inch in 6 weeks. So that also shows that it's material, it's tissue.
Yeah. So
would you say that with short cycles, taking tests and other compounds, wouldn't you also notice more side effects when you're coming off? And so if you were to have, let's say, a 24-week period where you could be on for all 24 weeks, where you only have to come off one time at the very end, versus splitting that up into 8 weeks, 4 weeks, 8 weeks, where now you're coming off twice, having to deal with, you know, coming off twice, having falling testosterone levels and still high low estrogen. You know, what do you thought?
So, so when we do DECA, this is if you're in my group and you see everybody's responses, they all say the same thing. You basically have 1 week of feeling low, basically. And what I mean by that is, so let's say you're on 600 milligrams DECA or something like that. You don't even reach HRT levels when you're doing like a steroid plotter graph. You're not even at HRT levels till about the 3rd week, I think, on 600 milligrams. You don't notice it. Everybody, even myself, I'm telling you right now, you don't notice it. You come off of 600 milligrams, you're normal. You feel fine, like you're still on. And then it is at that last week, from like the 4th to the 5th week, where it dips below. And this is where I tell people, you can go on HRT, you go do a week of HRT or TRT, go ahead. But I always tell this to people, there was a study pointing towards the lower your hormone levels dip, the more sensitivity the receptor, you know, kind of making up for things. So like, oh my God, I have such low hormones, I'm going to increase sensitivity so I get more out of them. So it seems the sensitivity went up even higher if you did let it dip. So normally I'll tell people, you can go on HRT if you want, but I say let it dip for a week and you just feel a little low energy, a little low libido, whatever, for like a week.
Wait, so on those breaks, do you completely come off, or are you going down to TRT?
So all individual, depending on the user's goals, right? Like I just said, most people I'll encourage, if it's DECA, I'm like, you come off, and as I said, you go into an HRT by week 2 or 3, whatever. You're at HRT for a week or 2, and then you go a little bit lower, and then you feel a little off for a week. That is what I encourage. And then a lot of people want to go on an HRT, so you plot it out, and they add 100 milligrams DECA, TAS, whatever the user uses. I have lots of guys that use TAS. I'm not like, oh, everybody has to use DECA. If somebody gets no sides of TAS, whatever, use TAS. So yeah, some go completely off. Some go on a HRT. Some will even use a little HCG if they don't get side from it that last week. So it's all individual.
Okay, now Dante, I'm pretty sure we talked about this, me and Adam. Dante Trudell was a big what's the word I'm looking for?
Proponent.
What is it?
Proponent.
Not proponent. Promoter. He was a big advocate of the short cycles of the shit. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, he was, wasn't he? Like 8 weeks.
Yeah, 6 to 8 weeks. But he would come down, and like his 4-week cruise would be 500 milligrams test in between those two gaps. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. I want to try it. I talked to Phil. I told him I want to do short cycles and then a long cycle and compare just for my own like data and research and to see, what the different outcomes would be. Because like from what I'm gathering here, I've done an 8-week cycle once. It was my first cycle. That was it. Given it was a great cycle, but it was my first cycle too. But I've always done like the 6, 12, 20-week cycles, and we titrate up over time, and I've gotten good results. And it's what I've done for my clients is what Phil, does for me. It's what I see is the most popular. Like very rarely will you see anybody be an advocate for short cycles like that nowadays. I think it was much more popular back in the day, but from what I'm gathering now, it seems like that might be the way to go. I don't think, maybe not necessarily in a contest prep, because contest prep, we really want to focus on retaining that tissue and, driving performance. So there's other aspects to take into consideration there. But in an off season where we're really just focused on growth, if you can get that initial response that you get in a cycle and then repeat that process, and it is actual muscle tissue that you're gaining, it's not just water and mostly glycogen, and you could take these, 4-week gaps and then go back on, repeat that process, get the same response. You're also giving your body, more frequent breaks from a ton of injections, which is going to help with just, maybe injection fatigue, scar tissue, just letting your body heal up, not having so much damage done to it. So you're not a pincushion for 24 weeks straight. It's good in that aspect, but it just seems like that might be a better way to really approach an offseason. I'm really curious to try it out.
Yeah. What I was going to say, yeah, it's funny. Like I said, you look at almost all the old pros, whether really old pros, mainly folks on 90s, 2000, like I said, Jay Cutler just came out. He did 8 weeks. You'll notice almost every single one of those guys talk about a 6 to 8 week cycle. And they said they just felt no more gains. Clearly it worked for, I don't want to say all, but like a large majority of all the successful bodybuilders. And yeah, same deal with the pre-contest. There's no reason to come off. You're very less likely that you're going to get a recomp effect and trying to come on and off, you know what I mean? Because that'd be the only benefit of coming on and off, is trying to get a recomp effect during your contest prep. It's like, no, all my guys, whenever they were doing like a long cut or whatever like that, they stay on. So it's not even like I'm biased. You know, that's the thing. A lot of people would be biased towards one trend, be like, no, always 6 weeks on and off. It's like, no, every single guy that's on a long cut, we stay on. There's no coming off. So I'm not even biased. I admit that there's the benefit to, you know, one way and another way.
Yeah. Are you familiar with Kevin Lerone?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Join my group after. You'll see he's mentioned like once a week at least. He's my favorite bodybuilder since like the dawn of time. I don't reference him if you're going to the short cycles or his time off, but yeah, he's like, yeah.
Yeah, so that's what I was gonna bring up, because he would take off. I mean, I wasn't alive during that. I don't really know what he fucking did, but from what I've heard, from what I've seen, he would take off, you know, for a long time, wouldn't train, wouldn't die, would like completely take breaks from bodybuilding. But then he would have these crazy, literally like 4, 6, 8 week transformations, like fucking insane. He would be out of shape and then be shredded on stage, like 40 pounds heavier. Now, there's obviously the whole concept of muscle memory, which are you educated on muscle memory? Because I kind of want to touch on that too.
If you go to my Instagram feed after this, you'll see pictures of me. So I actually live streamed this just to prove how big you can explode. Because like I said, I would train for like 4, 6 weeks, whatever, and I'll stop for months. I added 2 inches on my arm and I live streamed it. Like I worked out on live stream. I added 2 inches on my arm. It didn't even work out my arms yet in 2 workouts. And I added 36 pounds in like 4 days. So yeah, muscle memory, I know, is like,
yeah,
4 days.
Yeah. And you can see that I live streamed it too, so you could see the difference. But when I go off and I don't train, I undereat. I don't train for months. I just live like a normal person. I shrink right down. So,
what was the edema like? Getting 36 pounds in 4 days.
Well, that's the thing. You'll see in the pictures. I never moon face up like a lot of people. You know what I mean? In my ankles, you will see like my wrists and my ankles. They always stay like, you know. Even though it's not a real term anymore, ecto, but like, yeah, I don't really hold water weight much. But you know, the 36 pounds, it was just all because I didn't gain 36 pounds of tissue, and I probably didn't gain. I probably gained a pound in those 4 days. It was all just immense of those muscles filling up. You know what I mean? Glycogen, water, and this, and that, and then food weight in the gut too, right?
Yeah.
Okay. No, what I was gonna say about Kevin was with the muscle memory thing. Do you think like the ability of him to be able to make those transformations, there's obviously huge genetic components of that. Yes, memory is alive and well, but most people aren't going to see those fucking results in 4 to 6 weeks like that. It's just not going to happen. Do you think a lot of that is due to the amount of androgen receptors that somebody like that contains compared to somebody else? Is that what is really driving that? Is he has this extremely high, his ability to upregulate is like extremely higher than somebody else?
Kevin, I throw right out the window answering that, because as I told you, like, I've not been serious about bodybuilding since like early 20s, so like 10 to 15 years. So literally, like I said, I'll work out and go on a cycle for like 4 weeks, and then I'll go off for 6 months to a year, whatever. And the fact that I've seen my body go up, like I said, 36 pounds in 4 days. And I did stick to a cycle. I did just 400 milligrams Deca. I went up 55 pounds in 4 or 5 weeks of a cycle I did. And you see the transformation. I absolutely exploded 55 pounds. Like, I looked massive compared to before. So the fact that Kevin was a complete and utter beast before, and he had a couple months to absolutely explode back into it, I don't even want to say genetics, because I've seen on myself that muscle memory is just a complete and utter miracle. So that is kind of my response. I think Kevin Lebroni probably has amazing genetics, but I think any other pro person who was at his size could have did the same, because muscle memory is just magic. That's
we'll just say in general, fucking any bodybuilder, I guess. Do you think that these guys is that like the biggest genetic component, or one of them is the ability to regulate more?
Yes, because in my article, the Androgen Receptor Downregulation article, there's a really, really neat study in here. They noticed people had a huge hormone variance, obviously, right? Some people had really low, some people really high, some people medium. the hormone levels and they had them all resistance trained. Some people saw amazing gains. Some people saw no gains at all. And like, what's going on here? And they noticed a trend. And they tested that androgen receptor sensitivity. Those with the best androgen receptor content, sensitivity, whatever, had the most gains regardless of where their testosterone was at. So people could have 1,000 ng testosterone naturally and have no gains if their sensitivity was complete and utter shit, basically. So I would say it's a mixture of that, and then a mixture of also. This is one of the references I always reference Kevin Levrone when somebody says I have shit genetics. I'm like, YouTube, Kevin Levrone meals. He ate a pound of goddamn fish a meal for 6 to 7 meals a day, massive amount of ground beans. So he's getting his vegetables and micros and a whole bunch of brown rice, and you see all the plates, massive plates. I'm like, when is the last time for a year straight you ate that much food, trained consistently and trained smart, right? You overtrain, you're going to ruin your gains. I'm like, when is the last time you did that for a year to be like, hey, my genetics or receptor sensitivity is complete and utter shit? So yeah, I would say I feel like some pros, maybe just normal sensitivity, but they ate, you know what I mean? They ate like that. And most people aren't. They're having 4 meals a day and doing if it fits your macros, right?
Yeah. Do you think blood work, like total testosterone level, say for example, is that an indication of androgen receptor sensitivity? Because we know that people metabolize differently. So is that necessarily what that means? Like if I take 250 milligrams testosterone a week and my test is 2,500 nanograms per deciliter, somebody else takes the same dose and theirs is 1,500, does that mean I have a higher androgen receptor sensitivity?
Because did you say if your testosterone was lower because you utilized it more?
If two individuals took the same dose of testosterone and one had a higher total testosterone level, does that individual have higher androgen receptor sensitivity than the other person?
No. The multifold way to answer that question. One of them is, there's like your sex global binding hormone, whatever is. There's certain things. Okay, one, depending on whether it's different enzymes, etc., how fast you clear the hormones. There's multiple studies on this that show that basically every single person has near the same testosterone levels, besides like a minor difference when they take the same dose of testosterone within the same study. And different studies they could show different levels. The main reason for this is that injection frequency, where you inject, the oil, etc. The oil changes the half-life. When they have a study that everybody's using the exact same testee, basically everybody has, and they test it at the same time. This is important from injection. If you test 36 hours your shot versus 24 hours after your shot, completely different level.
Yeah.
When they have all variables the same, basically everybody has the same testosterone level. It's like testing metabolism differences. There's almost no difference.
Okay, so you're saying like the variances that we see, because like there are all the other variables taken into account, like when you got the blood work done and whatnot. But if we had all those variables exactly the same between two individuals, and even though they might have vastly different genetics, that their total testosterone should be the same on blood work with the same doses of testosterone.
Because we know people's androgen receptor sensitivity varies, yet the studies where they'll take 100 plus or whatever people, there is none of those variances in like the total testosterone basically on the same drug. So, that seems like it would be zero indication, because we would see some type of outlier in the study. You know what I mean?
So do you think the variances that we see are just due to people having like all those variables in different places and maybe like underdose tests and shit like that? You think that's really what that is?
Yeah, I think the two variables is underdose gear and the other one time of injection. People have no idea how much time of injection, even by 10 hours, alter. Like I said, you can see in studies on Deca, 24 hours, the peak is massive. So if you don't check for the highest level, if you don't check 24 hours after a shot, and it's a 6-day half-life, that is the peak from that shot. So, there's so many people where they're like, oh, I took my test 3 days after, or I took it 1 day after, you know what I mean? So I think those are the two biggest variables. And then the oil, right? The different the viscosity of the oil completely changes the absorption rate. So there's massive differences. It's why people have massive differences in test levels.
Okay. So I guess that's a good point for anybody who's getting blood work done, getting your labs done. Always Well, you should know this. Take all variables into account, but just like even things that you would not think really matter, like try to do things at the same time. You're doing your labs, like, you know, you're going to take it on Monday at 8 o'clock before work, and you're take your shot of test on Sunday. Like, keep everything consistent so you can make the most accurate comparisons, really.
In the exact same spot too. You do it in the delt versus the glute, completely different absorption and peaks.
Yeah, it's crazy. So how do you feel about post-cycle therapy versus testosterone staying on, like blasting and cruising versus coming on and off?
So there's not many studies on this because I feel like they don't really care. Like, they give somebody testosterone, they feel better here and there, and they're like, okay, it's doing its job. I've mostly studied this in animals. So, you know, when you take testosterone, you shut down LH, FSH, whatever. You shut down different signaling hormones. You also shut down signaling hormones in the adrenals. And there's mainly only studies on animals on this, because I guess, you know, if an old man on TRT comes to the doctor, it's like, oh, I feel fatigued, eat better, exercise, take some water, you know what I mean? Like, they're not checking all these values. And stuff like adrenal hormones are very overlooked. What's funny, in animal studies you see commonly, when prolonged use of steroids, they get, I hate this term because it's a made up term, adrenal fatigue. But like they show in the studies, they get Addison's disease like symptoms. Addison's disease is somebody who doesn't, you know, produce adrenal hormones, you'll die, whatever. So yeah, they notice Addison's like disease symptoms. Their cortisol shuts down, aldosterone shuts down, and I notice this in tons of TRT forms, and guys are catching on to it for a good few years now. So many of these guys are on cortisol drugs, aldosterone drugs, etc., because they feel like death. Their digestion goes to shit. They feel like just fatigue all the time. And cortisol is the main life-giving hormone. And so it's needed to convert all of our energy, protein, carbon, fats, into utilizable energy. So my main thing with TRT is that when does this hit? How bad is it going to be? Just all the hormones are shutting down in general. So for me, as an example, I use myself as the best reference. I will, for as long as I can, avoid TRT and almost every other mechanism besides TRT in the long term.
So when you take a cycle, you just come straight off cold turkey, or do you do a PCT?
Depends. So I'll have periods where I'll do like a 4-week cycle and I just whatever, get bored of it, I'll stop. And then I'm like, okay, but no, I'm going to get back on soon. So I'm not going to take PCT drugs, you know, like Clomid, you feel like shit. Nova has its side effects too. And I'm like, I'm not going to take PCT. I'm going to get back on soon. Then months will go by. And I'm like, no, I'm going to get back on next week. And so a lot of times I will spend months in the gutter kind of, because I'm like, I'll get back on. So sometimes I would do PCT and sometimes I won't, because I'm like, no, I'm going to get back on. Why would I PCT right now? So
do you notice that you recover the same with both of those approaches?
So this is what's interesting, because there was a study that showed men who used steroids for like years, and it was like 10 years after, or I forget, no, they used for 10 years and years after, they all basically had all the same hormone levels. It was like they never used, very little difference. So it kind of showed that everybody recovered basically. I noticed for me, my hormones will stay low, not completely in the gutter, but low if I don't PCT. But I'm maybe the anomaly where I feel completely and utterly great. I will want to, you know, do the D like 5 times a day. I'm full of energy. I feel absolutely great. And meanwhile, my testosterone will be low. But the second I do take any PCT-like items, you know, I shoot back up and I'm recovered. And yeah, so I don't feel different, but I know my hormones are different.
I talked about this before. I experienced that too. Last year, I had to take a few months off because I had an allergic reaction to growth hormone, and I came off everything cold turkey. I was on nothing for over 3 months. And I thought that I fully recovered because I felt great. I felt fine. Like, I felt completely fine. And then I checked and my testosterone was like 20 nanograms. I was like, what? I was kind of shocked. I thought I was back, but it's weird how I felt completely fine.
Yeah. The main way I know is that for me, pregnancies will happen basically. So I could be a year off and I'm feeling great. Didn't take a PCT, no pregnancies. The second I take the PCT too, so you don't even have to get tested. It's like a pregnancy will happen. So
wait, you just have a bunch of kids?
No, not necessarily, but yeah, well, I have 2 kids anyway, so yeah.
There you go. You got
So I have a question about the androgen receptor sensitivity and making sure you don't downregulate on cycle, what are your thoughts on injectable L-carnitine on a more prolonged cycle to help with promoting androgen receptor upregulation?
So in my article, I list a bunch of things that I think are worthwhile for increasing androgen receptor sensitivity. And carnitine is actually one of those items in there. However, most people ask me this because they're thinking the reason I'm suggesting it is it's like, hey, we're on 6 weeks. Let's add it either before the next cycle to increase sensitivity, which happens on its own. My focus on it, since there's no study to prove that it'll help prevent them from downregulating or to help recover faster, there's only a study proving that it enhanced the sensitivity. So since there's only a study on that, my main suggestion is of using it on cycle. And my experience with this, of suggesting to so many people, they could be on like a TRT-like dose, they report and feel like they're on an actual cycle on it. So my take on it is get as much bang for buck in when you're trying to gain, you're focusing all your energy on this 6-week bulk or whatever. It's like, hey, let's actually make this hardcore, like let's go get as much gains as possible, because we know it does enhance sensitivity during. And there was a really neat study on it, and it was just with the oral form. Most people think you got to take the injectable, which obviously injectable is more, you get more out of it. Yeah. But the study was just on the oral form, so people who don't want to do more injections. And the study showed, I think, don't quote me on it, it's been years since I read it now, but it was like 100 milligrams of testosterone a day, I believe, compared to the carnitine group. And they didn't test muscle growth, they just tested the androgen receptor sensitivity, but they had all the effects. I believe the main effect they were testing was on sexual function, and they had way better sexual function, drive, whatever, the carnitine group. So yeah, I feel it's an insane aid during the cycle.
So do you think it would be a good idea in, let's say, if you wanted to do, a little bit longer than a 6-week cycle, if let's say you get to 6 weeks and you start to feel that plateau, then you throw in the injectable carnitine, you can prolong the cycle? Would that make sense?
So that is one thing I've never tested, but I keep guys, let's say you start the carnitine, you stay on it, and then you stay on it, guys who wanted to double the dose and go further, they would stay on it, see no extra benefit. So it obviously didn't, well, not obviously, anecdotally, it didn't prevent downregulation, but would it increase upregulation at the end of that cycle? Obviously no studies on it, and it definitely isn't something I've ever tried. And I think the main reason I don't focus too much on extending the cycle is more so of a bias on my end. I feel after that 6 or 8 weeks, me personally, I'm just kind of done. I never even make it to the 8 weeks. I'm just like done mentally, you know what I mean? And I like that little break. Kind of what Dorian Yates said, but Dorian Yates, he was extreme hit, failure, whatever. He was like, he liked those 6-week blocks because it's like, I'm done after then. I need that break.
Same idea as high intensity, low volume training. Smash it and then take a break versus spreading it out over 3 or 4 sets.
And that's how I look at the bulks, just with like even the food aspect, right? Like you're done prepping, you're done eating that much. It's like I just need this little break to relax. So that's why I've never namely even attempted to try it. That might work. Yeah.
How do you feel about the approach with clenbuterol? I've heard two sides to this story. I haven't done research on it in a while, but I remember seeing there's the old school approach is like you gotta run it and then come off because the downregulation will occur from your B2 receptor. So you're not going to get that same effect regarding lipolysis, fat loss, whatever. But I also read that actually isn't related to fat loss. It's more so related to the receptors in skeletal muscle. So the only thing that's not really helping past the point is you're not going to get that aspect of clenbuterol that helps with muscle retention, some anabolism, because there's some aspect to that as well.
I'm in the same boat as you. It has been years since I researched on years. Oh boy. I know what they're referring to because it also enhances androgen receptor sensitivity. I had that listed as one of the items that does that. But the main mechanism of its fat loss with whatever the H2 whatever receptors, I don't see. That doesn't make sense to me. Basically, what you're saying, what these other people are saying. But again, it's been years.
Which part doesn't make sense?
that it doesn't downregulate the fat loss effects. Is that's the whole kind of you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Like the effects of how it is working with those receptors. I can't think of the word I'm trying to use. Yeah, but again, it's been years since I've researched it, but it wouldn't make sense to me because we know that's how it's working with the respiration. Like it doesn't make sense that, but I could be wrong there.
I think it is a good analogy to androgen receptors because, you know, it is a common, whether there's a myth or misconception, whatever it is, that people are going to do 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off on, you know, a cutting phase while taking Clen. But I've seen the best results just being on Clen and then upping the dose when you need to, because the drug still works. Like, you're taking the drug, it's not like it's just going to stop working after a period of time. You're just going to have less side effects, but then also less of the actual feeling of it, but it's still causing fat loss. So with that logic, you know, being on for, let's say, 8 weeks on Clen, you know, titrating the dose up over those 8 weeks potentially, you know, you're probably going to see more fat loss with that approach versus 2 weeks on and then 2 weeks off, 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, because the drug works. So even though the receptors are downregulating a little bit, drugs are still working, you're still getting the wanted effects. Couldn't that translate over into the androgen conversation where, you know, if you're on for a period of time, the drug still works, you're just not seeing the large spikes that you would see from initially starting it. So over that period of time, wouldn't you still have more of the drug working at the muscle cell, causing muscle protein synthesis, just without the large spiking glycogen that you get from the initial cycle? More time on the drug, basically.
Were you going to say something?
I was going to say, how would, if clenbuterol acts on the B2, it's a B2 agonist, if it were to downregulate and, you know, you weren't to get the same effect, I would imagine that that's not really, like, it makes sense, but wouldn't that be fucked for people that are prescribed it for asthma, if that's what occurs? Like, if it just eventually becomes more ineffective over time, like,
it still works though. Like I would take like 40 micrograms or 60 micrograms, and it's like after 4 or 6 weeks of that, it's still working. It's just not as strong as when I first started taking, but it's honestly more tolerable.
That's why most everybody will notice. This is what I warn everybody when they first take it. You'll shake, you know what I mean? You get the uncontrollable shake that lasts like 4 days, starts to lessen. It's still working, like it's used for asthma and stuff like that. It's still absolutely working, but it has this major peak effect, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Is that from what, like the fat loss aspect though, or is that that's from something else? Like, it's like you drink caffeine for the first time, right? But then eventually you get used to it, but caffeine still fucking works. Like, you get the beta alanine, you get all the fucking itchy skin, eventually you get used to it, but it's still working.
Yeah, like I said, it's been years since I researched in depth on Clen.
So we don't know.
Yeah, that one is like, I'm gonna put my foot in my mouth or talk up my ass to say any further on Clen.
Okay, all right. So I think we covered the downregulation, upregulation pretty well. From what I gather, we have evidence that downregulation does occur. We have the evidence is there.
In humans too.
So it shouldn't even really be a discussion that it doesn't happen. People are just ignoring the evidence or not finding it and not making the effort to find it.
Yeah, in humans, and then as well, nobody's denying the initial spike, and nobody's just posting, not post use, but you know, what's a good word for this? Like, further down the line, nobody's just wanting to talk about that it doesn't happen week 6, 8, etc., week 10, whatever.
Yeah. So you were on Vigorous Steve's podcast not that long ago, right? Have you talked about this with him?
Yeah, I've done 2 or 3 podcasts with him. I can't remember if we discussed it, but he did end up, because he gets asked. A lot of my followers follow him as well, and people post to be like, "Oh, what about Taeian Clark says this? Taeian Clark says this," and so he did recently do a receptor downregulation video. I think we did discuss it. Yeah, we did, because we did. And I believe I mentioned that in video. I'm like, look, we have this study at whatever 8-week mark, whatever. And yeah, I think he just didn't really, you know, reply to it. The study I brought up.
Okay. Is there anything recent that you've been researching, getting involved in? Anything interesting, cool?
Yeah, this one I almost don't want to say anything on because I know it's going to get hate. Did you see? Okay, so one semi example. Did you see the Halo videos I did recently?
Yeah.
On Halo testing, I did it with Niall, I did it with Vigorous Steve, and everybody lost their mind on that. And Niall actually took down one of the videos because people were just hating on, like, it's the most toxic steroid in the world and this and that. And I was just like, post one study, it's toxic, and nobody could. And Dean St. Smart posted one on like a dying cancer patient with 2 different cancers and tons of radiation and this and that. And because she was on Halo, that is what gave her an issue. She was on all these other drugs, and it's like, you know, what an N1 case study of somebody dying is, and she did die, by the way. It's not really the proper study to compare to whatever. Anyways, I'm like, yeah, nobody could produce one single study that it was toxic. Yet all the study I'm posting is on all these women and children, and they're showing no toxicity. So the thing I've been researching a lot lately, and I don't even want to say because I know the message is, and it's going to be tons of hate, is I'm mainly in the future going to be sticking to a lot oral only cycles. So
oral only cycles.
Yeah. Which,
what?
You know, everybody's just going to be like, oh my God, they're so toxic and this and that. So I kind of had an epiphany like I did with the Deca only basically recently. One with like talking about, you know, short acting versus long acting forms, you know, Deca test. And it's like, okay, do I want to take 4, 5, 6 weeks off after cycles, what I suggest to people, etc.? It's like, no, why not just have like a 7-day period off, which I'm testing on my clients right now. We're going between 7 to 14 days and seeing if any difference kind of in gains, which is, you know, going to be hard to judge, but going to come to some, you know, some might be able to figure it out. So my main thing is this, is that why wouldn't you want to stay on almost as long as possible and just have that short break? No brainer. If you can gain amazing in 6 weeks, come off a tiny period, amazing gains again over here. So that is one of the thought process of it. The second is that orals on average are just always so much essentially stronger. Many people know this and admit this. It's why nobody ever wants to get rid of them. Like, I love my D-ball and this and that. And studies do prove this. Now, a lot of people be like, oh, D-ball is just a lot of water weight, nitrogen retention, etc. And it's like, no, like when you, first off, when you come off the D-ball only cycle, you lose very little gains in comparison to a test cycle. Anybody who's done both will be able to tell you, like, you go on test, you're up 10 pounds the first week, obviously depending on the dose. Test is so much water weight. D-ball is moderately lean. This is why guys like Mike Mentzer, etc. competed on it. So yeah. Now, one of the biggest benefits is for serious guys that get that short break off and they get to do lots of big cycles. The other benefit, which I'm going to throw out there, is going to make it like a groundbreaking release video like I did with the Halo. It also basically doesn't cause shutdown. So all the guys that are natural, you know, they want to use SARMs because they don't want to shut themselves down. And one of the biggest reasons for me is that I don't want to further shut myself down anymore. I just want to, you know, recover, lots of babies, whatever. So yeah, D-ball basically doesn't shut you down. Not a lot of people don't know this. So
D-ball is a test derivative.
Yeah. So what I came across, I started looking hardcore into the study. So a really neat study I found, the LH and FSH basically did not alter at all over the whole course. Of it was like 10, 20, 30 milligrams, just like the Halo. Now, some studies on the higher end dosages, testosterone shut down. But literally what the studies basically showed was basically as soon as you stopped it, the testosterone shot right back up to normal because they tested it a week later and the testosterone was literally at baseline before they ever touched the drug. So it was, and obviously it didn't day 7 go boop. Obviously, as soon as they stopped the drug, it started climbing. Who knows, maybe within day 1 it was recovered. And obviously the proof to that is that LH and FSH was untouched the whole time. So with LH and FSH intact, your body's, you know, it's ready to fire. It's just looking to, you know, signal the testes. So no shutdown. Basically back-to-back cycles, and it's such an amazingly strong compound at that. And there's tons of proof to this. I was finding some really neat old studies where they were comparing it to testosterone and stuff like that, and in humans too, which, you know, because mice, you know, they could be a little bit different. D-bol had 5 times the nitrogen retention as testosterone. So 5 milligrams of D-bol was equal to 25 milligrams of testosterone a day. So you have something way stronger, less sides, essential in a lot of areas, let's say, very liver safe, very this, very that. So yeah, that is something that I'm probably going to be talking about recently, and something that I've been trialing a lot of my guys on, and the only thing I'm going to do in the future, not shut down, whatever. So yeah,
so you think the liver toxicity from orals is like not an issue?
There's a study in women, 200 milligrams a day on D-bol. Everything basically fine. There's studies at 100 milligrams a day in men, and this and that. So yeah, I did a video on this where I did a mega dose of D-bol long ago, which, by the way, I don't suggest high dosages. So that's the other thing. It takes that out of account. Dr. Robert Kerr has a book, and he talks about like different powerlifters and bodybuilders. He treat it, and there was guys using 7 bottles of D-bol a day. You have guys like Peter Grimkowski, who is the co-founder of him. He used 3,000 milligrams plus, mostly of orals a day. So many accounts of guys using mega doses of these orals. And it was funny, none of these 70s pros dropped out of liver failure, and these all these medical accounts and this and that. So it's grossly overstated. But then to add to it, I don't suggest mega dosages anyway. So yeah, so this obviously is going to have a lot of people pissed off in your comments that are going to be like, you know, oral only cycles.
So you're saying the liver toxicity from orals is extremely overhyped, is what I'm gathering.
On the typical orals, so I want to make sure that's clear on the context. A lot of the typical orals extremely overblown, but there's no denying things like Superdrol is extremely liver toxic. There are studies on that and stuff like that. So certain ones, yes, but the typical main ones, extremely overblown.
What is it that makes Superdrol extremely liver toxic and D-bol not?
Who knows? You know, you're referring to liver wise. Maybe a chemist could more so answer that. I'm not going to put my foot in my mouth there. We just know it's kind of like comparing Mtran to all these other ones too. Certain ones that just like that 1 milligram, 5 milligram, 10 milligrams produces better results, more toxicity, more this, more that, right? So yeah, who knows?
Do you have any idea, Adam?
Well, I mean, it makes sense if it's just harder to break down because of the molecular structure, then it'd be harder for the liver to break it down, or liver, you know, stress. That could make sense. But also, another side effect of orals is they're going to decrease HDL production because they're bypassing the liver, and HDL is produced in the liver. So that's the other main side effect. Besides, like an increase in liver enzymes, you're having a decrease in HDL, more lipid skewing from even Anavar, you know, moderate to high dosages, but you know, all orals, besides like Proviron. So what are your thoughts on that?
So yeah, this is one where I want to make the context clear too. D-bol is going to be my mainstay because it's, you know, all A's have side effects and different side effects. D-bol personally is going to be my mainstay suggestion in use because of all the other side effects of, let's say, a lot of other ones. Like we know Anavar is kind of special in its effects of being more lipid destroying. D-bol, this is another tidbit I'm going to leak out here that a lot of people don't know. A lot of people today are concerned about, you know, their RBC, the red blood cell count jumping up. You know what I mean? A lot of people are nowadays trying to control it. D-bol at the more moderate dosages didn't raise it at all either. D-bol it's the more heart safe one, basically, let's say, in a lot of parameters. So yeah, that's one thing I want to make clear. Context and everything has this little bit of more sides here, less sides here. But D-bol, out of all of them, kind of seems to be the best bang for the buck, basically. So I'm not going to compare it to Anavar, where it's like, hey, yeah, this is a little more damaging in certain areas, but D-bol is kind of very overall safe. But again, I'm not saying safe before anybody hates. It's more safe, let's say.
So now let's say for someone who wants to put on some muscle, they want to start bulking, and they want to do what you're saying and take an oral only cycle. What are your thoughts on the fact that orals can also mess with your appetite, mess with digestion, increase bile production, and if you can't eat food, you're not going to be able to bulk no matter what steroids you take?
So this is going to be another little tidbit here of decently big info because and I thought this too. You know how Tutka, Utka, etc. kind of became big there because oils impair bioflow. Me personally, I took a shit ton of all this and some NAC with it and all the things that improve bioflow, curcumin, like so many different things. I noticed a moderate benefit, not even minor to moderate benefit at best. And all my clients too, I stopped suggesting oils for the longest time because you can't eat, you can't grow, plain and simple. No matter how much Tutka, Utka, whatever, never equal the same effects. And then it took me a step back, like with all the research I do, I'm like, wait a minute. Why are the orals causing this impaired bioflow effect? Obviously, there's a downstream effect till you get to that root cause to everything. It's like orals, just because they're methylated, don't impair bioflow. What about it being methylated makes it impair bioflow? And I started going down those downstream effects from there. We once again arrived to, like I mentioned earlier, orals are stronger in general. There's no denying it. Like I said, it compared to test, it was 5 times more nitrogen retention. When it retains more nitrogen, there's more mineral retention, et cetera, et cetera. It's just stronger general. Stronger gains, stronger side effects. It's calcium, and I noticed this is with all the orals too. They're stronger, and they're stronger calcium retention, calcium uptake, et cetera. And you notice in more patients with orals, they have whether they have hypercalcemia, just higher calcium levels in general. It's the calcium that impairs bioflow. It was the calcium that caused impaired bioflow, gastric acid production. Calcium causes the muscles to contract, right? You want magnesium and calcium. One causes a stronger contraction, one helps it relax. Calcium, all across the board, slow down digestion, basically top to bottom in like 20 different ways. So I, tried it on myself and started trialing, on people too, basically controlling calcium more on the orals, bam. Because I was the same way. I took 10 milligrams Debo before, no appetite, done. Can't eat, can't grow. Now, no problem. So it's a mixture of realizing that orals are stronger and not trying to utilize 1,000 milligrams a week of an oral, realizing that it's stronger using a lower dosage and controlling calcium. And yeah.
Can you give us an example of what you would do to control calcium?
So mixture of things. I always like my K2, always suggest my K2. I'm pretty sure I was like the first one suggesting K2 like 15 plus years ago on GH15 forums, and now it's taken off. K2, but also K1. People don't realize the importance of that. So adequate magnesium, adequate K2, adequate K1, and then high bicarbonates foods. So kind of to sum it up, just to give like the proper answer, is I have my guys eat a lot of cabbage, lettuce, and seeds like sunflower seeds and hemp seeds. So we're getting our K vitamins and adequate magnesium, and then I always supplement a little extra K2. So yeah, basically that. And yeah, my guys and myself, when I've tried it, has been able to eat for once.
What is your recommended dose for K2, D3, and magnesium?
So the K2, depending on what form, obviously there. The K2, if it's MK7, I keep it somewhere between 100 to 300. But then there's a really neat study that was shown to reverse calcification. So every like once a year or something like that, I would have people suggest like a mega dose of like 600 or 700 mcg of it. You don't want to run a high dose of anything too long because every little thing interacts with, whether it's one or a dozen or nutrients we don't even know because we haven't tested what it interacts with. Like example, vitamin K depletes vitamin E. Vitamin E is your natural aspirin in the body, keeps the blood thin and keeps it flowing. So you never want to go make a dose of anything, a balancing act kind of say. But yeah, so about 100 to 300 mcg, depending on the vitamin E intake of the diet.
Okay, that's pretty solid. I want to go back. You mentioned something about people are all susceptible to their RBC right now. Everybody's talking about that, and it reminded me of something. I just had surgery last week, and before I had surgery, I had to go, do like the pre-op stuff, do my blood work, and they called me back in. The doctor sits me down for my blood work. And this has happened like in other scenarios. It's always just fucking hilarious to me. The doctor sits me down and says, "Yeah, your hemoglobin's high and your liver enzymes are high, and you're like at risk for liver damage, and you should probably dump blood." My hemoglobin was like fucking 2 points over the high range, right?
Yeah.
And my AST and LT were in the 60s, right? And I had trained like, you know, a couple days before this as well. And I'm like, God, this is normal. Like I do this for a living. I look at this. He's like, oh, this is normal. You see they're high. And I'm like, the training would raise that. He's like, I don't know if they would raise that. And it just blew my mind because I always had these conversations. I'm like, you're a fucking doctor working at, you know, one of the best hospitals in New York City right now. And you're literally acting like this is an issue. And it's crazy because there's a huge problem. It's very apparent that so many people appeal to authority, and even in this industry, that like people don't even have degrees, but the ones that do have degrees, you always see it like in their bio. Here's my master's, or the doctors on TikTok. And you know, when you say something that's the opposite of what they say, or you don't agree, or they come in and try to disagree with you. I mean, I literally had a fucking doctor tell me to ice before to reduce inflammation because it's going to help with recovery. It's just fucking crazy. But these people can't seem to grasp that doctors are not specialized in every fucking field. Even I've met a lot of endocrinologists that still don't know shit about gear at all, don't know anything about what we do. They, you know, prescribe testosterone to people to inject once every bi-weekly their dose. And it's because coming from you've been doing this for 20 years, self-researching. I'm the same way. I'm not as old as you, so I don't have as much time. I've been doing this since 14, but you know, just the genuine curiosity of this and liking to learn about it is you're going to be way more well-versed and better educated when you take this time to do the research on your own. The doctors don't do that. They're given whatever is given to them at school. They memorize it, they pass tests, and it's not about fucking gear. And it's not about a lot of the shit that relates to bodybuilding because there's so many different aspects, and they don't teach them all of that when they go to school for that. Like they learn specific avenues, and that's what they specialize in. It's not like they learn all these different avenues. And to be able to really coach somebody in bodybuilding, you need to understand everything and be able to put it together. For some reason, the general population can't understand that. And they'll see the guy that says upregulation happens, downregulation is impossible with a PhD and say, well, you're not a doctor, so why would I listen to you over this guy when he went to school for it?
Yeah, and I think I told you, because I just say, I'm curious what's in this. I got a hold of it was like the 2017 Ped and Endocrinology textbooks, like the university textbooks, right? Like 5,000 or something pages, what I can't remember.
Just for what the endocrinologists, their textbook for college?
Yeah, and I'm reading it, and when you get to the actual hormone parts, like like people really don't understand. Like they know nothing about AAs, and they know a minor amount about just plain old testosterone and its functions, etc. Like very brief paragraphs. And everybody else out there, they think, yeah, as soon as they got a PhD anywhere medical, like even if it's endocrinology, it's like this guy knows nothing. You know what I mean? They're taught like 5% of what the average like person who researches on this, and they don't understand that all those guys, like I think Dr. Todd Lee, whatever, you know, the YouTuber, there's, you know, the doctor YouTubers, and everything that they're talking about when they do talk about is stuff that they have research on their own via Google and NCBI. Like the people really don't understand is that everything that they're researching is the same stuff we're reading, and that their schooling is nothing to do with what we're doing, you know, like nothing at all. Like, but you know, they'll always argue that, be like, well, why would I listen to you when this guy's a doctor? And it's like, dude, that 10% extra knowledge he has is from Google. Like he doesn't know, you know. When
you become, I don't know, like when you just like learn more, you do research, become, you know, well educated. The way that I say it sounds bad, but like really, this is the reality. Is anytime I go to a profile and I see somebody that has like a personal trainer certification or a PhD in their bio, like for me, that's an immediate red flag, because it means they're using that to try to demonstrate that they are knowledgeable, which, you know, I would too, but after so much experience, you realize that a lot of these people don't know shit, but they're going to use that to talk about things and act like they do. Yeah. And half the time they really don't. And it's, I'm a doctor, I have this degree, I did this. So I took the fucking NSAM course. I know more about mechanical attention than you. And it's just bullshit. A lot of these people are taught outdated information as well. They never make the effort to do more research.
Yeah, and well, most people, that is their full-time job, right? Whether they're an endo or this or that. It's like, this guy isn't going to go home after whatever 10-hour workday. He's not going to research. He literally knows about his very narrow area of, you know, the endocrinology, which would be that it's all very basic surface layer stuff. And yeah, people really don't understand. It's not even in depth on the health areas of A's use or this or that. Like,
I think it comes down to the person, right? Because like us, we're interested in this. You want to you want to build a business, you want to make money, but you obviously at the same time, you generally want to help people because you want to figure out how this shit works and give people the best service, right? You go to school, you get a degree. I feel like there's a lot less people that are like, have PhDs that are like, oh, I really want to help people and continue to make that effort to learn. And it's more so like, okay, I got the degree, I got my job. This is all I need to do to get fucking paid now. Because the more I learn, I'm not going to make more money, right? It's not going to, I don't have a business to build. It's just, I got the job, I'm going to make money. I have all that I need to come to work and get my salary. I'm not going out of my way to do anything else. And it's like me and you, it's, you know, we want to learn more. We want to be able to provide better service and just become better educated. So I feel like anybody who really thought about it with common sense would come to that conclusion. But unfortunately, everybody is persuaded by the fucking the degree or the certification.
What you said, I think, basically sums it up. Is there is a very big line between this doctor, this PhD holder, whatever. He went to school, learned from his book, and he's done with it all. Versus somebody who is researching, and you know that sounds like you, like me, like I hate saying I'm a researcher because obviously I'm not like in a lab doing this or that, but like, you know, I'm a researcher. All I do is keep learning. Like the majority of my time of the day is the learning and the researching, and that is, you know, we're always going to be ahead when we're doing that in a sense, like, you know, versus our 10% knowledge in this area or field or whatever.
Of course. I mean, you take somebody that for 10 to 20 years, they do this, and at 10, 20 years, they are constantly doing, like, I'm honestly not spending 8 to 10 hours a day researching. I'm not as involved in as you are, but, you know, I spend a lot of time, and you do that for 10, 20 years on like specifically things related to bodybuilding, physiology, what's related to us. You're obviously going to be way more fucking educated than some guy that went to school for 8 years, still a long time, but they're not learning this niche stuff, all the different avenues. Like, it's just not, it wouldn't even be possible for school to teach them that amount of stuff in the time frame that we've taken to do all this research and accumulate and also put it into practical application, because people also like to disregard experience, and experience is one of the biggest factors as well, right? We could sit here and talk about how shorter cycles and longer cycles are different all day, but if me and you both have never done it, then what the fuck does it really matter what we talk about?
Yeah,
true.
Yeah, but
I'm taking steroid cycles, so fuck do they know?
Hypothetical. What if we were to take steroids? What would happen? But yeah, I think we covered a good amount here. Is there anything else you wanna add on? Anything else you wanna talk about?
Well, no, don't ask me that, dude. Like freaking, like you said, like 20 years of like ramblings I could go on here. Like,
okay. Anything, Adam?
No, that was good.
All
right, guys. Well, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Brass Tack Bodybuilding. Make sure you check out Taeian, check out Adam. I'll have their @ in the video. And yeah, I'll see you next time.